Good afternoon and welcome to this special edition of the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 16 years of profiling IT mission programs in the federal government. This is our first annual Profiles in Excellence Chief Information Security Officer program, which will be coming to you from the virtual studios of WTOP and the Federal News Network. I'm Luke McCormack, and during today's show, we will discuss cybersecurity trends and strategies at numerous government agencies and hear from the key leaders making them happen. With me on today's show are Wanda Jones-Heath, Principal Cyber Advisor and Chief Information Security Officer at the U.S. Air Force, Major General Matthew Easley, Director of Cybersecurity, Office of the Army, Chief Information Officer, U.S. Army, Jim Richburg, Public Sector Field Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Information Security at Fortinet, Brian Dack, Senior Manager, Solutions Engineering at Okta, and Chris Roberts, Federal Technical Director, Quest Software Public Sector. Well, this is certainly a very big subject, and we have a couple of folks here from the armed services, and that certainly is a big subject in regards to delicate balance between enabling those war fighters and protecting all those assets to keep the country straight. Wanda, let's start with you. Give us a state of the state. How are things looking out there in the U.S. Air Force? You just recently broke out the U.S. Space Force, and now you got the Air Force. What's happening over there?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share what's going on with cyber within the department. As you mentioned, I am the Principal Cyber Advisor and CISO for both the Air Force and Space Force. So that is definitely a huge undertaking. We are continuing to put cybersecurity first. My tagline for the last 2 years has been cybersecurity that works. Ensuring that we are an enabler and not a disabler. We are starting to have a lot of conversations throughout the enterprise, working with our lead command, ACC, and the rest of the team from continuing to modernize our enterprise. Cybersecurity is certainly important. We are working through a lot of initiatives to include our Zero Trust journey, EIT as a service, ensuring that we have that rock solid digital foundation. Talent management is certainly a part of our cybersecurity approach. And a lot of the executive orders on cybersecurity, the recent memo on critical infrastructure protection, we are all in ensuring that we are making sure that we can meet our mission requirements, our operational requirements, while security is certainly at the forefront in everything that we do. I am busy. My team is busy. We are collaborating, of course, across the DoD and the rest of the services. But one thing that I know for sure, cybersecurity is certainly a team sport, and the department is all in.
And no question, you've got that broader reach too with the entire defense industrial base. And I'm sure that Zero Trust and some of these other things, really important pieces and elements to that. Major General Easley, can you describe sort of what's the state of the state going on over there? And maybe just describe, I don't think people realize how huge the Army is and the daunting tasks that you have over there.
Sure, excellent. Good afternoon, Luke, and fellow panelists. Real honor to be here this afternoon to talk about cybersecurity in the United States Army. So as Luke mentioned, the Army is probably the largest federal organization other than the Department of Defense itself. Between the Army National Guard, the Army Reserve, and the traditional active component Army, we have more than a million soldiers supporting our nation. And then hundreds of thousands of civilians and contractors also supporting us. Understanding the cybersecurity of their digital needs is a huge undertaking that takes tens of thousands of people to do. Part of our journey over the last year was to actually establish an independent office of the CIO. So my boss, Dr. Raj Iyer, is the first independent CIO that the Army's had as a separate agency within the Secretariat. That allows him and in cybersecurity really to take a broader view of how to defend the network and all the assets on the network. Traditionally, we've been tied to our network operations team, our G6 side, up until last summer. And now as a separate organization, it allowed us really to really expand that concept of cybersecurity to really look at all the different systems that we have in the Army, to have a much better look at our business systems, our financial systems, our human resources systems, and how do we kind of defend that application layer at a stronger level. We've done a lot of analysis of our critical infrastructure, of our power projection platforms, or our depots, our maintenance facilities, and how do we protect that operational technology at those systems? And then how do we build that into a complete ecosystem? If you look at the number of, I talked about the number of people we have, but the number of systems that we're authorizing, our authorizing officials, is staggering. We have thousands of systems, again, from IT systems to OT systems to weapon systems that we have to authorize. We have to understand those systems. We have to gather that data from all those endpoints and put them into a big data platform so we understand who they are and what they are. As Wanda discussed, the president recently put out a zero trust strategy for our federal government. So we've been pushing in a number of areas over the last few months, based upon foundational work that we've done over the last years or even decades. Zero trust has a number of pillars, everything from endpoint security to trusting the users to understanding the analytics they're using on that system. So we've set those foundations, and we'll talk more later on how we can use that and use that better to create a much more porous perimeter to allow more flexibility for our workforce, and cybersecurity can help us do that.
Wow, big move to
big
snap.
move.
I'm sorry?
Oh, go ahead, Luke. Another big move, and I'm sure we'll all talk about this, is a movement to cloud. Cloud is going to enable our systems to expand at a global scale. It's going to allow us to fight under the concept of multi-domain operations. And it's going to allow our workforce more flexibility. And having cybersecurity solutions that were designed to work in a cloud environment, so we can move the solutions between an on-prem position to an off-prem, has been critically important over the last year in the COVID-19 environment.
Sure, big moves there, including snapping off the entire CISO organization and making it more of an autonomous. So you have that check and balance there. I think that's really important. I just can't imagine the tens of thousands of vectors that you're trying to protect there, and these embedded systems, et cetera, is got to be an absolute daunting task. And I know you've got a lot of capability out there that's helping you to do that. Jim, let's talk about maybe some of that technology that's helping the Army, the Air Force, all the war fighters protect these environments. You have a unique situation there where you're striped across all these various entities, and you're seeing it from a different viewpoint. Tell us what you're seeing out there.
So good afternoon, Luke. And I really want to build on the comments that both Wanda and Major General Easley have made. Fortinet is a big global company. We really are across the attack surface in terms of capability, but in terms of working with our federal partners, I'd really single out two things that I think are priorities for us right now. We've got, as Wanda said, this slew of executive orders and national security memos. So they have aggressive timelines and deliverables. So helping our federal partners accelerate that migration to the cloud, and then helping them on the path to zero trust network access. There are foundations, there are pillars. They are at different places in their maturity. And then, to build on what Major General Easley said, post-COVID networks are not going to look like the networks we had in March 2019. Operational technology is coming on at a scale that we really hadn't contemplated prior to that. And software-defined networking. Most federal agencies have got a national footprint. In the case of the armed services, a global footprint. So the classic wired networks with Cat5 don't work. So helping them have the ability to gain the functionality and the capabilities of software-defined networking and do it in a secure fashion is something that we really are prioritizing. So the technology's there, and if anyone had the luxury of saying, I can do a greenfield rip and replace deployment, I think the solution's easy. The challenge comes in helping them incrementally do this when they're just replacing one component at a time.
Right. It's not a complete lift and shift. It's more of a Lego block snap in sort of best in breed. Speaking of which, Brian, Okta really in a unique situation, really a unique space, a very important space to make sure this ecosystem is solid and secure. Tell us what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Luke, really what we're seeing is echoing what Mrs. Jones-Heath and Major General Easley are mentioning around the executive order. Very big push from across the federal government in meeting those the requirements that are laid out in from supply chain security to zero trust architectures. And really what we're seeing is agencies are kind of specifically really taking a look at their needs around, how to build out a zero trust architecture, right? It's not a, hey, I'm going to buy this solution and now I have zero trust. It's examining your existing solutions, as Major General Easley was mentioning, right? There's been a lot of investments over the last, over decades that are going to be leveraged in those architectures, but then also looking at what they need to implement in order to, achieve kind of that baseline capability that'll help them get, kind of really move their organizations to that zero trust, posture.
Zero trust, very important part of this apparatus and zero trust architecture, right? Really important here. Chris, how about at Quest? You all again have a unique situation there where you're looking across the entire ecosystem. What are you seeing out there in regards to the recent implementation of various techniques and strategies to secure these environments?
Sure. Good morning, Luke, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Quest Software has been a federal partner a better part of 30 years or 3 decades, longer than I've been around, than all of us, quite frankly. But what we're really seeing is with all the executive orders, yes, with the push to zero trust, to the fast pace of modernization, what we realize is that there's significant technical debt in a lot of our agencies. And while we want to move like a bullet train, we're more like a 1860 locomotive trying to get to our destination. And what we discovered is if we can better help our federal customers understand where their infrastructure investments are, where their platforms are, where the services that run on those platforms and infrastructure reside, and then lastly, how those inner applications that are so critical to their operations, how they are using different components of those services, platforms, and infrastructure, we can better help them. And I think the rush to get to a destination sometimes leads to many missteps. And by helping our federal customers understand all the components or that technical debt they have to sort of like reconcile before they can move faster is a key part of our strategy. So while yes, we are working in IT modernization. Yes, zero trust security, but also looking backward to help them understand exactly this is where your investments are. This is where the difficult legacy components of your platform are. For instance, we talked about Cat5 networks not working across the globe anymore. Yeah, so now you have to figure out exactly how do we now help them not just scale, but also secure and provide the best set of services on existing and as they migrate to new infrastructure. So we have a unique portfolio that allows us to both look backward into the current environment and also help them prepare for the future environments.
Yeah, no question that technical debt rearing its ugly head, as it always does. In some cases, a little bit of work done on that, certainly recognizing now that there's a lot of investment that needs to be made there. And let's face it, a catapult tectonic shift, if you will, into this new operating model based on what we all had experienced with COVID. Jim, let me go back to you and let's talk about a specific program that you'd like to highlight. Once again, you're in a unique situation there where you see a lot of different things happening. Give us an example of one program that you'd like to highlight that's really making some progress in furthering this agenda.
So I'm actually going to give you 2, Luke. And we've already talked a lot about zero trust. And, Matt talked about the multiple pillars. The difficulty with zero trust is it's got a half a dozen or more functions. And that means you end up with a lot of stuff to procure and maintain. So can you simplify? That's really the thrust of what we've been doing with a number of agencies. It's about a connection. So the minimum thing is you have 2 points. You have the user and you have the other end. But can you get it down to where you say, I have a software agent at the remote end, and then everything else is a Swiss Army knife of functionality at the other end that can take care of authentication and the security and the policy enforcement? And the answer is yes. And we've got proofs of concept actually running with multiple cabinet level agencies to help them integrate with what they've already got. They don't need to turn all the functionality of the Swiss Army knife on, but to fill the holes in their zero trust model, they use those components. And the second part is software defined networking. Big federal agency, cabinet agency with a nationwide operating footprint, moving away from the wired infrastructure and supporting a mobile population outside the branch office, and having some people who have law enforcement investigative responsibilities that mean they have to be on the dark web. So this is this intersection of the need for software defined networking with zero trust. And this agency has actually rolled this out for all of their law enforcement component across the nation. So there really are good technologies that helping our federal partners figure out how to bring them on is something that we're proud of we've been able to do.
Great technologies that have come into the environment just in time. Wanda, we talk about technical debt, and that certainly is an issue, but you all have almost the opposite as well. There's all this advanced capability in these technologies, in these weapon systems, in these aircraft, et cetera. I just can't imagine the daunting task of making sure all those vectors are secure, et cetera. Why don't you give us an example of one that you'd like to highlight, a program that is really getting a handle on that?
Hey, thank you for that. Matt and Chris kind of mentioned something, the balance of understanding the security posture for the current systems and then focusing on the new development, the future. So what we're doing is ensuring that from a risk management standpoint, that we're able to kind of maneuver in both spaces. The weapon systems are very complex, or we also have business systems that we have to protect. And over the last 2 years, we used the industry standards of penetration testing. That has allowed us to really dig into the risk and the vulnerabilities and identify them from an adversarial lens to be able to make sure that we are protecting the data, the infrastructure, and all of that. So our fast track ATO approach has been working fairly well. We've used it in the F-35 SPO development area. We've used it in our operational technology area. And so we are trying to infuse more of that approach across the department. Also, we are continuing to participate in Hack the Air Force efforts. We've done it on a number of critical systems, and we have certainly been able to close a lot of attack surfaces from using that type of approach. And we're continuing to push that. It has been received very well. A lot of the new like SecDevOps approach with our Kessel Run and Space Camp and Besbin have been very fruitful for the entire department when it comes to software development. And so those type of industry approaches is what we want to focus on in the future and now.
That Kessel Run story, amazing. Maybe we can get into that later. The Hack the Air Force, is that a sort of a crowdsource type thing where the public's coming in and hacking away, if you will, and then reporting that back to you? Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are in, I think, Hack the Air Force 6 will be kicking off, and we try to do a number of systems, and we actually pick the systems based on current security issues that we definitely want to address up front.
Outstanding. I was going to ask you when that started, but if you're in number 6, apparently it's been there for quite some time. So that's fantastic. Glad to see that. Nothing like some good crowdsourcing to help keep this country safe. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.